sponsored by Musco Lighting. And as a result of our presenting partner for day two, we've got an opportunity for you to win a signed shirt. Loads of them are on offer. Check out our social at Soccerex for all of the shirts that are available to you. Every day we'll have a winner. That winner will get to pick one of the remaining shirts. We'll try and replenish the stock as well, so the photos that you see on social media are up to date with the shirts that are still available. Edwin van der Sar, Louis Saha, Jean-Pierre Papin are amongst the names available to you. And because our presenting partner is Musco Lighting, what you have to do today is think about youthful footballers, male and female. Tell us your shining star under the age of 21. In other words, who's the most talented or your favorite footballer, male or female, under the age of 21? Tweet us at Soccerex and use that hashtag SoccerexConnected. In addition to that, make sure that you go on the app and engage with our exhibitors and set up lots of private meetings as well. Soccerex Connected then, it's day two, 5-day event. And we look forward to having your company. I'd love to hear as well where you're watching from in the world. And if you've got a really cool home office, send me a photograph of that as well via Twitter at Soccerex. But let's move on now to our 4 o'clock GMT panel. It's entitled Increasing Consumption Whilst Reducing Interaction. And as stadiums welcome back fans, we asked the question, how do you drive sales of food, drink, and merchandise whilst limiting human contact points? We're delighted to be joined on this panel by Moon Javaid, the CSO of the San Francisco 49ers, Ken Scott, the head of Inspectorate at the Sports Ground Safety Authority, Peter Swordy, the Director of Health Safety and Compliance at the London Stadium, and your moderator is Stephen Adelman, the VP of Event Safety Alliance at Adelman Law Group PLLC. Stephen, a very good afternoon to you. Over to you.
Thanks very much. Hi, I'm Steve Adelman, speaking to you from Scottsdale, Arizona in the United States. And it's going to be quite warm here today. So perfect soccer weather or football, depending on where you are. And we're going to have a conversation which is, well, we're going to pay lip service to what we're supposed to talk about, which is increasing consumption. We'll initially talk a little about food and beverage sales, but really what we're going to talk about is increasing the consumption of, well, football itself, specifically how to safely get fans back into seats, which will obviously increase sales of food and beverage, merchandise, and all other good things that sustain our work as well as the sport that we love. So with that, we do have an esteemed panel, Peter Swordy, Ken Scott, Moon Javaid. Gentlemen, let's go. Let's first begin by paying lip service to our designated topic. The future of stadium concessions from a safety aspect, let's just make it really simple. Is cash dead? Are there going to be nothing but cashless transactions at football stadiums around the world from now on, or is that day not here yet?
I think it depends the status of the stadium, what kind of league and what kind of sport you're operating in, and what kind of turnover the stadium makes to be able to invest in technology. London Stadium, we have 320 till points operated by our catering partner, Delaware North. They're not going to go back to cash. All of our ticketing can be used with cell phones, mobile phones, but we're looking towards moving towards NFC technology. But I'm sure we're a couple of steps behind the 49ers.
I would agree with Peter. I think we're looking now towards cashless, ticketless, and touchless. All of these things kind of play into the helping to keep the venue as sterile as possible. Things like grab and go, self-service checkouts, all of these things that would limit the touch points, the interaction between the spectator coming in and the environment within which they are they're now seated or they're walking around. I think one of the issues I have heard is that we're kind of looking to develop the equipment such as reverse ATMs. So these are the kind of the reverse, as it suggests in the title, that putting money in but getting a token or a card out that allows you to spend within the venue. But I think from my trawling for information on this, that I think many venues that had this type of technology in their kind of 3 to 5 year plan have rapidly moved it forward because of the onset of the pandemic.
Yep, I agree with Peter and Ken here, and I'm not so sure it's cashless is going to completely take over, and it's binary, and we're going to go to all venues not taking any cash, but certainly a large leap forward with a lot of venues now only taking now becoming cashless. And I think it's kind of alluded to, the reverse ATMs are key here. And so the reverse ATMs, we actually did purchase some recently for Levi Stadium. The contracts there aren't too cost prohibitive. So in terms of venues switching over to a cashless scenario, don't foresee that being as challenging as maybe potentially some of the touchless solutions that Ken and Peter were talking about. So thinking about self-service kiosks, and that's where you can really jump into a lot of cost. Something that could be really interesting is thinking about the first venue that doesn't have a point of sale. So today a lot of people interact on their mobile phones, especially when we consider like our market in San Francisco. A lot of people are on their phones. Do you really need to interact with the point of sale? Could you have a QR code, which you're seeing pop up in a lot of restaurants today, that pulls up a menu and you're able to transact just through that? And I don't know if we're so far away from a point of sale-less venue as we think. I've seen some providers out there that are already looking at solutions in this that could be a point of sale-less venue.
I think that's true. I think depends upon the demographic of the fans and how feisty they are. Maybe depends upon the sport. If they're well behaved, I think that's a great system. I think if they're a bit more lively, you'd have to think more deeply about how you might transfer that to those guys.
Let me
right,
interject.
Would be.
Sorry, Ken, go ahead.
Sorry. No, I was just going to say, I think that would be, the demographic would be kind of sports specific. Some sports attract an older demographic that may or may not be as comfortable in using this technology. Whereas some sports, are of the age group, the millennial age group that would thrive on this type of connection with the venue.
Yeah, and the point that I was going to make is, Peter, you're at London Stadium. Moon, you're at Levi Stadium in San Francisco, both very large, resource-rich environments. Can you see a diversity of venues around the world? We have an enormous range of venues and event professionals watching this conversation right now. There are surely people who are in less resource-rich environments than us four. What do we say to them? How does it work in a smaller stadium or in a country where cell phone service is spotty, or maybe people don't have cell phones as widely as they do in the UK or in the US?
I think that's a really important point, Steve, that we've got to remember that this, in many cases, this huge capital cash injection that would be needed to transform venues to this all singing, all dancing model is coming on the back of, the fans have not been inside many venues for a long, long time. So they're coming at it from a negative budget perspective. So I think that we need to be very, very understanding of what that situation is, that they aren't going to be cash rich at this point. So in looking towards kind of seeing what the problem is that we're trying to solve, and that's to make a safe environment, we've got to look that in the eye and balance it against the risk of each of these individual venues. Now, for the venues such as Moon and such as Peter's venue, the London Stadium, where large numbers would be returning, then clearly the risk is a lot higher than in some of these smaller venues where the numbers would be lower. So I think that, we kind of focusing on what, what good would really look like, but we do need to, as you quite rightly point out, that not everyone will be able to aspire to that. And we need to have solutions to make sure that fans can come back to those smaller, those venues which are less cash rich, but they can do it with highest levels of safety.
Yeah, I think that's a fair point. Sorry, you go ahead, Moon.
Sure. So I think overall for me, when I think of something like cashless, that's something that is achievable for even venues and teams that don't have as many resources as effectively all you really need to employ is the reverse cash ATMs. And so if I was a venue, I'd just be looking at my share of cash transactions in the past, and the smaller your percentage of cash transactions in the past, the easier the migration will be for you to move to a cashless venue. As I think about, the other pieces, again, if we think about self-service kiosks, that's going to be really, really challenging for for a venue that doesn't have much resources to move down that road. But moving towards a point of sale-less venue now, so in times like this where that can be the most innovative teams that could do something like a point of sale-less venue that doesn't have many resources, because you'll save $500,000 to $1 million on investing in point of sales by virtue of taking this leap. But overall, with countries that might not have Wi-Fi, I don't know if I'm planning something where there is that would be directed towards there not being Wi-Fi, because Wi-Fi is probably within the plan within the next 5 to 10 years in the roadmap of developing Wi-Fi in that ecosystem.
Yeah, I think if you look at your local coffee shop, they use very small devices to be able to purchase products. So they're just using phone lines, some of those guys. So if you get to a small stadium that's got 200, 300, 500 people, it may even be that kind of localized technology can solve a lot of those people's problems. And the other point, I think, is that you've got to think about the fact that you may not be able to do completely contactless. So how do you decontaminate, wipe down surfaces, wipe down products, wipe down coins, wipe down notes, let them lie for 72 hours, etc. Is think about what are your backup strategies.
Yeah. So we have danced around a bit around the elephant in the room. So let's just go there. Before we went live, Ken and I were having a conversation about who, if anyone, has let fans into stadiums yet. And we both immediately came up with Australia and New Zealand. And then Ken mentioned India. Here in the States, some US football stadiums, so American football, have allowed in some fans only in some states. And not to make this political, but one can ask whether that was a decision driven by health or by other considerations. So let's try to have a grown-up conversation. How should people watching this conversation think about their decision whether and when to let patrons back into the stands? How should one think about that?
I think, Steve, by and large, it will be a decision that is outside of the gift of the venue operator. So this will be something that's driven by governments and their health agencies. So because the spread of the virus around the world is at different stages in different parts of the world, then the idea that we can switch to all fans coming back at one point, I think, is just not going to happen. It'll be driven by prevalence. It will be driven by location. It could be area specific within individual countries, broken down again to rates of infection. But the decision will generally, certainly it will be within the UK, will be made by government bodies, by government agencies and or their health or medical advisors. And I think that's the right way to do it, so that we're coming at it from the right angle, and we're not coming at it from any potential leaning towards kind of trying to solve commercial or economic difficulties. But I think that generally sport has bought into this. I think that the one thing that I certainly urge all sporting events to do is to be ready for that day. It will come possibly with very little notice because of such as the violent swing and nature of the virus. So please don't sit and rest on your laurels during the period of pause when spectators are not allowed to come into venues, but use that time productively to plan for when the green light goes on and people can start coming back in again.
Yeah, I think I agree with Ken. I think it's all in the planning. I think Ken is the author of the national government guidance on trying to get people back into sports grounds. So ask for a copy from him after this show. The important thing is in the planning. We spent a lot of time and money and effort on. We've only had one game behind closed doors. Sorry, with fans returning. We had 2,000 fans come in against Manchester United, West Ham against Manchester United in early December. We learned some great things from that. We learned some interesting things about mask wearing and people claiming exemption, which I think is a societal and a behavioural thing, which I think we need to challenge and confront in terms of government guidance. But we work closely with both central government and with local government. We have a local government licensing system in the UK, which means that our local authority in this area helps us guide us on what kind of resources, control measures, approaches we should be taking along with the central government guidance. And it worked really well. Unfortunately, we went back into another lockdown and we're kind of back from square one. However, with Ken and colleagues and the local authority, we're planning now to return to 4,000, 9,000 and 18,000 in those stages in the next months, maybe in the next few months.
Yeah, I think for me, not too much to add here. I think Ken and Peter said it best.
Well, okay, so let's push this. That's my job here. So the bright day arrives, our respective governments say, okay, you can reopen the doors, fans can come back in. And let's say that you have all spent your time wisely and planned, and you have plans in place, and you've trained your staff to implement those plans. Don't forget about training staff. And then, because coronavirus is insidious and it's hard to prevent people who are asymptomatic from entering a place because they don't know they're sick in the first place, let's say that a couple of days after your match, someone calls up and says, I can't smell, I can't taste anything, I have a fever and I'm in the hospital. What will you do with that information?
So I think that's very akin to maybe a famous quote by Mike Tyson, which I love, which is, everyone's got a plan until they get punched in the face. And so,
yeah, I love that line.
Yes. So I think this is, we all need to have a plan for when we get punched in the face. And it's unreasonable to assume that this won't happen at all of our venues. It will happen at one of our venues come when we allow fans back in. So I think it's all about just being prepared, as Ken and Peter alluded to beforehand. And so when that happens, you'll enter into a protocol, and your protocol that you'll have developed internally on what you're going to do. And I'm sure some of the first steps that will be involved is working with the local government and working with contact tracing to try and understand the extent of how big or how far this could have traveled. But overall, I think that once that does happen, we all need to be calm and prepared and work through our protocols as we've laid out.
I think it's
I think Steve,
sorry, Ken. Go ahead, Ken.
No, you go, Peter. You go.
No, just saying that it is inevitable. So one of the things they've done in the UK, every stadium has a thing called a safety advisory group with the kind of fire service, the police service and the local council. And onto that group, they've now put the local public health advisor as well. So joining all those dots together, one of their roles is to make sure we have that kind of alert mechanism, whether it's to do with the software, whether it's joining together with the NHS. And also, all stadiums, it's mandatory to have something called a crowd doctor. In our case, we've also got a guy who's actually works on the intensive care wards at King's College Hospital in London. So he provides a great amount of guidance, very quick guidance, and that will assist us greatly should that happen.
Yeah, the point I was going to make was the fact that we've all been away from live sporting action for almost 12 months now. So I think the first thing to do is to regain the confidence of those people, because it's the norm now not to go to places that are crowded. So we're conditioned to do that now. And I've used the saying a few times that it takes 6 weeks to form a habit. And we're well beyond that point, the habit of not going to sporting events. So I think that, confidence of fans will be important. I think also, getting back to one of my earlier points about the age demographic of the fans back in pre-COVID days will need to be looked at again, because it could be, if you had a particularly aged demographic, i.e. those who may be more susceptible to more serious effects of contracting the virus, then clearly that will impact upon their confidence in coming back. But I do see, as we move back to getting fans back to venues again, that we will have a mixed economy. So there will be people coming back who will be vaccinated. There will be people coming back who maybe refuse to be vaccinated because they've got thoughts that, of all of the issues around vaccination, concerns around it. You'll get people coming back who will have gone through some PCR testing. So at the date of the test, i.e. maximum 72 hours before the event, they tested negative, and therefore wouldn't be carrying a viral load of sufficient quantity to infect others. And then I think there will always be a place for social distancing. So you could eventually, back within sporting or live sporting events, have 4 different categories of people. And how that would be arranged within the venue would be very, very difficult for people like Peter and for Moon in their respective venues to organize, because until there is a guarantee that people who are vaccinated still can't transmit the virus, then there is a risk that even with a 60 or 70,000 capacity venue of all fully vaccinated people, it still could turn out to be a super spreader event, unless it could be proven that the vaccine protects not just against the individual, but also protects against the transmission.
Well, that's terrifying. Thanks for that ray of sunshine there, Ken. So just a thought for American viewers, taking from what Peter suggested about having a public health person in the room. In the US, that would be the incident command system that we're talking about. And under ICS, you don't necessarily have to have someone from public health, but I think clearly Peter's right. And in whatever country you're in, under whatever name you call it, you're going to want to have someone who has public health knowledge, as well as people with event medical specialization to deal with the sort of hazards that you're likely to have. So, if you're doing, I don't know, an electronic dance music event, you want someone who's knowledgeable about hallucinogenic drugs and their interaction with other things. These days, you're going to want someone who has at least some basis in infectious medicine so that they understand what are the risks of gathering people together at your stadium or event space. And again, I completely agree with what Peter said, which is you want that person literally in the room so they can be part of the health and safety conversation, just like police, fire, and EMS. I think that's just transparently a good idea, and certainly one that's timely for these times.
I think
Ken, were you going to say something?
That's absolutely essential. I was just going to say that I think that's absolutely essential, because I've gone on record a few times as saying that event organizers should be making the local directors of public health, or whatever that title might be, their best friends. In the UK, they have legislation, new laws that are vested in them to protect against COVID and the local prevalence in their individual areas. So unless they get the confidence from the running of the event that it's been done to the highest levels, their default position could well be to say no. So gaining their confidence, letting them see that you are running a good organization, that you've got all of the plans and preparations in place, is absolutely fundamental to giving them the confidence to not say no, and to think, I'm happy to run with this because I'm confident in the ability and the preparation of the venue to run this event safely.
I think that's very important, Ken. And I think just to touch on it briefly, not too much about it, but for the purposes of insurance going forwards and litigation into the future, you're going to have to prove a good linkage between all of your decisions on control measures as you went towards building the event. Because as sure as eggs is eggs, somebody's going to litigate at some point and say, I got the virus from Stadium X. Even though they touched some handle at a petrol station on the way to the event, and that's where they got it from. So, so yes, that causality is going to be a big thing for all of us.
Well, let me briefly address that issue because I am a lawyer, and thankfully the US and the UK are common law countries, so the legal principles are very similar. And I suspect many, if not most people watching this conversation also live in common law countries. So let me do a 1-minute summary about the issue that Peter raised, which is causation. So what we're talking about here is, what is your liability if you open your venue doors to fans and then, some short period of time later, somebody calls up and says, I've lost my sense of taste or smell and I'm in hospital? Will you be liable? And as an attorney, my answer to my clients has been almost certainly no. And that is a very unusual thing for a lawyer to say with confidence, that there is not much liability risk. And the reason for that is there are 4 things that a plaintiff, an injured person, would have to prove in order to establish that they were harmed by attending your event, by coming to your stadium or arena. And the 4 things include proximate cause, that unlike, going to the petrol station, that the only place where they contracted coronavirus was at your stadium or arena, to the exclusion of every place else. And the problem with coronavirus is it is insidious. 40% of people will never show symptoms at all. And among the people who eventually show symptoms, most will be asymptomatic when they are most infectious. Now, that's a lawyer telling you health things, but I can read, so can you. These are facts that you should have, at your fingertips as well, because you can read. So, from a legal standpoint, the fact that most people, if not almost all people, won't know that they're sick when they are most infectious means that proving that someone got sick at your place as opposed to every place else will be exceptionally difficult, if not impossible. So that is the one gift, truly a good thing about coronavirus. It's really hard to prove. And that's going to mean that, at least from a litigation standpoint, you're probably in good shape. Now, just to put a little coda on that, don't rely, this is a lawyer telling you something now, please don't rely on the fact that you're likely to win a lawsuit. Don't rely on that and say, well, I don't have to do a good job on health and safety. You do, you should. We're urging you, we would all say it together if we had practiced this. It is really important to take health and safety seriously, because you don't want to get known as the place that had the super spreader event. So reputational damage should drive your health and safety program, even if fear of litigation doesn't. And in this happy, rare instance during the pandemic, fear of litigation should not be a significant concern. But there are still all the other concerns which are genuine and serious, most particularly health and safety of your patrons, the athletes, all of the attendants and staff, really everybody, and that includes you. So there, sorry for the rant, but there you go. All right. There, I've been the excitable boy, so let's carry that thought forward. Supporter section. So I'm wearing my Arizona Tottenham Hotspurs supporter shirt. Wear it proudly, even though they've just dropped 2 in a row and look pretty sorry doing it. But I'm still proud. Supporter sections. We've already mentioned social distancing. Well, that's the one place we can be certain that there will not be social distancing. So what do you do with supporter sections? Are they even possible?
I guess you mean kind of singing, playing musical instruments, all that kind of stuff.
You bet. The best fans, the most supportive, the ones who will definitely want to come back to the stadium first.
It's really difficult. I think Ken may have some other points to make, but at the moment, there are no plans to have away fans. So in the UK, normally there's a proportion of the ground can be away fans, but it's a relatively small proportion coming to the ground. At the moment, there are no plans in the return of spectators to have away fans yet, and I think there's various reasons for that. There's another risk you don't need during your planning for the event. It's tough because the whole issue around singing and projecting aerosols, etc., is something that we want to avoid. And at the moment, the recommendations from the Premier League, not all sports, but for the Premier League, is that people should all wear masks in the venue. So with that, I suggest that their singing and shouting will be pretty muffled. And the poor attendants or stewards that we have in the UK, their job would endlessly be to say to people, now you've finished drinking your coffee, put your mask back on, off, on, off. It's a thankless task. It's the same thing in the UK with people standing. As Ken well knows, is trying to persuade people to sit down at soccer matches, football matches, is a real massive task. So actually, it's just another thing that the steward has to do. As Ken said, they need to be a professor of sociology, criminology, and God knows what else. I don't know what your thoughts are, Ken.
Yeah, I'll just add to the points that Peter's made there. I think when I was writing the document planning for social distancing at sports grounds, I deliberately inserted into that document the spectator code of conduct. And I put that in there, and one or two people ridiculed it because I said, you shouldn't be singing, you shouldn't be shouting. But I was coming at it from the basis that that document is a safety document. So you can't start the premise of a safety document by putting anything other than what good looks like. But I think in doing that, we all live in a real world. I'm a football fan myself. Fans want to sing and want to shout. So it means then that if you can't achieve the best practice, then you've got to look at some mitigation. And Peter's already mentioned the wearing of a mask at all times would seriously help towards limit the spread of aerosol. But I also come at it from the basis of that football fans in the UK in particular don't always get the best press, and you could argue in many cases it's all for good reason. But I think that the returning spectators that we see in the early days, it will be like getting the golden ticket from the Willy Wonka golden ticket, and so they will almost do what you want them to do, within reason, to ensure that they keep that ticket. But I also think that sporting fans coming back, they've all been impacted by the virus in the way that the rest of society has been. Many of the people coming back as sporting fans will have worked and kept us safe over the last 11 months as frontline key workers. So, they come at it with a basis of a solid social and moral responsibility to themselves, their fellow fans, their friends and colleagues, their families when they return to their neighborhoods. So I'm coming at it from the glass half full perspective of expecting to see the good in people. And I'm buoyed by the fact that for the very limited number of pilots that we did manage to get off before we went back to the kind of the lockdown again, was that people did behave in a very, very good way. And not only that, they helped the stewarding in as much as they were helping to self-police. So reminding people, you should be wearing a mask, or you shouldn't be doing this, or you should be doing that. And I think all of that bodes well. Now, I'm not saying that when the novelty of coming back wears off, that we aren't faced with a bigger problem. But I think that, there are some things for me that are sacrosanct. And I think that if social distancing is going to be with us for a while, then it's important that safety management teams only allow the numbers of people into the venue that they feel they can make safely comply with that requirement. Because this is a serious safety issue. It's unlike any other of the risks that we faced in our careers in respect of safety at sports grounds. It's an invisible risk. It's the one that we don't know everything about it. But as you said, Steve, it's an insidious risk. And I think that we need to make sure that, safety management teams come back and they manage with small numbers initially. So they test their systems and procedures. They build up confidence not just for their safety management teams, but also for the people coming back, to make sure that they are going to be safely protected whilst they're inside the venue. So I guess the message from that is kind of baby steps, but I am coming at it from the eye of the eternal optimist and the glass half full. And I'm really hoping and expecting that spectators will step up to the plate and recognize the dangers in doing things that would be counter to any code of conduct.
I admire your optimism. Moon?
I was going to say, we don't have, a supporter section per se within the 49ers and Levi Stadium, but, working with Elevate Sports Ventures, our agency, we get to work with a lot of clients that do have more traditional supporter sections. And overall, I think a lot of the things that we chatted about through this conversation, it's really about making sure that you have a great plan and it's well thought out, and it probably will be socially distanced in the first year, depending on whatever your local municipality or local government ordinances will really allow or dictate. And I agree with Ken and Peter here, where it's just about being careful at first and making sure that you're well prepared and you have a good, thoughtful plan. And as you are prepared and keeping it socially distant, you will have to work through lots of training to make sure that your ticket takers or ushers or whoever it might be are constantly reinforcing these rules, which no one will want to follow once they're within your building. So it's going to take some diligence in sticking to the plan, I believe. And then really, as you start to see it become, if we start to get to a place when it feels more natural and more normal, and we start to have a couple of games under our belts, I feel like that's really going to change the tide and really help with opening up the stadiums back in a couple of seasons. And so hopefully we're just talking about one more year with this pandemic, with the way that the vaccine distributions could roll out in many countries. So hopefully 1 year of really sticking to our plans and being really diligent and, wearing masks even when we don't want to, so that we don't have one of those major events that we'd all like to avoid.
Steve, I think one of the key points here is that it's engaging with supporters. It's a communication thing. So instead of doing things to them, it'd be a case of doing things with them and fully understanding if they do need that explanation. I'm pretty sure that you've been living on another planet if you don't realize the risks and what the messages are coming from, the key messages coming from government. But I think that it's working with those groups, and I think that doing that, in informing that communication and treating them as an adult in an adult way, then I think that would help to get a greater buy-in. I think if you tell someone not to do it, then you are more likely to meet resistance. And I'm sure from your lawyer background, you've come across that many times.
Yes.
No, you're totally right, Ken. There's a UK police mantra at the moment, which is to educate, explain, encourage, and only as the fourth option to enforce. But interestingly, just anecdotally, when we held our one and only 2,000 people event, people gravitated towards each other because they hadn't seen each other for ages. And football is an incredibly social game, and season ticket holders will sit in the same seat, and they go there because it's their thing, and they're human beings, and they want to be near each other, and so it is tough. So in the first instance, they will move towards each other, and they're used to being in a pub, maybe being close to each other, that kind of stuff. So it's hard, but as Ken said, the more you can encourage, rather than using a kind of rod, you're using a carrot of the golden ticket, then hopefully we can make some progress.
We're nearing the end of this conversation there. Before I get to your parting comments, excuse me, let's talk about messaging. Ken, you touched on it, and I think this is really important. What do you think patrons, I'm going to say need to know, but what will best encourage them to do the health and safety things necessary so that when stadiums reopen, that they can reopen safely? What can we tell them to draw them out of their homes, but still get them to be compliant?
Yeah, I think that I'm hoping, and that, you know, over the last 11 months, people realize what they need to do, you know, whether they're going to their local supermarket or whether they're going to a local sports ground. The principles behind it about hygiene and staying socially distanced are common. I think I see confidence being kind of at 3 different levels. I think certainly we've got, you know, the people that are needed as part of the safety team need to have the confidence to return to work, because they're working now in an environment that is a little bit more risky than it was pre-COVID. I think by seeing that the venue is properly prepared and they have the necessary stewarding arrangements in place, that will then foster confidence in the returning fans. So they'll be very much watching what they see and how they see the venue, the provisions they put in place to give them the confidence to come back. And I think that, if you like, the product of those 2 levels of confidence will in turn give confidence to the regulators, to the governments, to the local health authorities, to say, do you know what? These people know what they're doing, and therefore we can, you know, we're happy to buy in to help to support them in what they're trying to do. And that is to get fans back to watching live sporting events again, which is our dearest wish. I'm sure we all want to see that.
I think something that's really important for us at the 49ers, and definitely, you know, something we do a lot with Elevate, is just surveying and doing market studies of fans. And so really today, if our NFL season is begins in August, we're surveying today to really find out what fans want and what will make them feel more safe in the stadium, so that we can really address some of those issues moving forward. And as Ken alluded to, then it's just really about communicating those plans back to the fans so that they feel safe. So almost along lines of, like, you said, this is what you needed to feel safe to come back, and this is what we've done. And as you go back and communicate out to those fans, something that we've noticed is just when you do it with player content, it's going to end up working. The fans are going to end up listening a little bit more. So if you do sort of a players walking through the turnstiles and how it's going to work moving forward, you'll probably get a little bit more of a reaction. And then if it's not the players doing something funny or creating a video around it, my mind is thinking of some of the, you know, airplane videos that you get when you jump on a plane, and, you know, it's the same video every time you jump on a plane since, you know, you've flown the first time. And so when airlines do something funny or something different, it really catches your attention, even though it's the same message, and you might end up watching it that time. So maybe leveraging some of those techniques that, you know, airplanes have used, the ones that have been successful, because it's a message that fans will need to hear, but maybe not ones that they will want to hear repeatedly. So how can we make that message more engaging to them?
Yeah. Peter, were you going to?
Yeah, no, I was just going to say, actually, the Premier League have a series of compliance officers helping to manage the games with the way that the players act in their particular areas, and getting the substitute players, the players on the bench, to wear their masks, and the coaches has actually been a critical thing, or will be a critical thing rather, when fans come back, because for a while that the subs were allowed to not have masks. I think they're enforcing that fairly rigorously now, and I think when people see that on the TV, and people see that people sitting on the bench wearing the masks, they'll be encouraged and hopefully comply significantly more. I know one strange thing, the issue about whether or not you should do temperature checking of people coming into venues. You know, there's a whole school of theory about that. But what we did on our single event is we used medical volunteers from something called the St. John Ambulance. They were scanning people, and having a medic do it made people feel very happy and safe. Having a great big hairy security guy doing it would have been a different thing. Having a kind of young, junior, happier, fresh-faced person doing it made people feel a whole lot better.
Yeah. We have about 3 minutes left, so let's do one lightning round. You know, I'm a glass half full guy, and I'm really eager to go back out and see matches. So what I'm going to ask each of you to conclude with is something that you either are doing or are planning or have heard of someone else doing that you think is going to be an effective strategy to make reopening healthier and safer. So it can be yours, it can be somebody else's, but let's give our viewers some, you know, constructive information that is hopeful to get us closer to a safe reopening? So that's the question. Let's wrap there. We've got 2 minutes, so who wants to go first?
I'll get it out the way first. Completing all your online medical declaration forms and completing all of that stuff online before you come to the event. Having a kind of Microsoft Forms thing, people send you, it's a record of everybody saying, I agree to all the med declarations, I agree to all the operational plans. It's great.
Okay, I'll go, Steve, I'll go with the need for even better collaboration between stakeholders. So this is giving reassurance, not just about people's safety within the venue, but with their journey to and from. So this, this would wrap in all of the technology, the advances in hardware and software around ticketing, around health declaration forms, around messaging, so that the fan on that journey is completely and fully informed of all of the issues, any risks. So it makes that journey so much more simpler. It can help to alleviate any queuing problems by suggesting best times of arrival, ways of leaving, best ways of leaving. But it's kind of, as I said earlier, it's about venues bringing forward what perhaps was their 3 to 5 year vision in terms of developing this technology into the immediate term now. But I, as I said, glass half full, can't wait to get back and looking forward to the day.
Yeah, I think, we're looking at some frictionless opportunities. And what I mean by that is the ability to enter into the stadium with maybe some more distant scanners so that you don't have to really come up to near a person to get into the building.
Great. Well, thank you, everyone. Thank you to Javaid from the San Francisco 49ers, Ken Scott from SGSA, Peter Swordy from London Stadium. I'm Steve Adelman from the Event Safety Alliance. Thank you, all of you who've been watching, and good luck. Be safe out there. And with that, back to the studio.